Well, for more on Apple, let's bring in Daniel Ives from New York. Daniel is Managing Director of Equity Research at Wedbush Securities. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
So let's start with your reaction to Apple's third quarter fiscal data. What were the big takeaways for you?
Yeah, I think big takeaways are there were a lot of worries going into this quarter, specifically around iPhone demand in China. You know, we saw iPhone demand in China definitely a slight uptick going into the next quarter. That's a big focus for the street, and also guidance much better than expected. So there were many yelling fire in a crowded theater, and ultimately this is a step in the right direction for Cook and Apple.
So let's break some of that down. We know that Apple is continuing its pivot towards services rather than phone innovation. But how important are phones now to Apple's revenue and growth?
They continue to be the core. I mean, the bedrock of Apple is on iPhone demand. And when you take a step back, 900 million active iPhones today, but services is going to be the growth. That's the fuel in the engine. That's why right now investors realize there's a metamorphosis happening at Apple. Now it's about Cook and Cupertino getting investors in the street there that they can start to value this company more in the services business rather than just the traditional mature iPhone business.
So as we look at year-over-year data for the third quarter, the iPhone represented under half of Apple's revenue for the first time since 2012. If we look at where the company started originally and where it is now and what it's focusing on, what would you say the Apple brand is today?
In my opinion, it's probably the most iconic brand out there among consumers, I think, bar none. And ultimately for them, the issue is going to be really how could they transition from an iPhone maker to a services. You already have Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, now Disney. That's going to be the tough thing for Apple. Can they transition to the services side? They have the brand. They have the 1.4 billion iOS devices to date. An unparalleled install base. Now it's about monetization. That's going to be the key going forward. And the biggest wild card here is China. Because 20% of iPhone upgrades will be coming out of the region over the next year.
And as we expand looking at the Chinese market, we saw that sales there fell, but CEO Tim Cook is still very optimistic about Apple's growth in China. How realistic is Apple's strategy in that market?
Well, it's definitely had its speed bumps, but I think fundamentally, you look at the numbers, 60 to 70 million consumers in China, we believe over the next 12 to 18 months, will be in an upgrade window for their iPhone. And that's really what it's about. Obviously, lower cost competition is going to continue to be there, the likes of Huawei and others that they compete with. But China is the linchpin of the Apple growth story. And ultimately, this stock's going to go up and down with China.
And what about in terms of services in China? Obviously, there are several established ecosystems, including Alibaba's and Tencent's. What do you think Apple's selling points would be there if they were to try and lure consumers on services there?
Yeah, that's going to be a very tough nut to crack, just given where we see Baba, Tencent, and others in China on the services, as well as on the privacy and some of the other issues there. A lot of it's really about the ecosystem. I mean, if you look, part of why it's such a golden brand, it's because once a consumer in a household gets into that Apple ecosystem, they don't leave. So, but you need more services to sell. You got Apple Music, but that's why the streaming service is so key. That'll be coming up later this fall in terms of them trying to be more of a distribution platform. That's a key growth into that flywheel.
And Apple is branching out, or at least solidifying some of its positions in everything from exclusive podcasts and credit cards to subscription services. And now, of course, there's reportedly a new iPhone that will have more advanced cameras. Not a huge jump from its previous iPhone, but what are you most interested to see in their future offerings?
Look, the drum roll is really going to be about 5G, and that's something we're not going to obviously see this cycle, but into next year. Right now, it's really about the install base. I think if you look right now at that implied guidance, they're looking somewhere between 180 to 190 million iPhones upgrading over the next year, and that's going to be key. I think when you look at this next trifecta of iPhones, you'll see a significant upgrade, on camera technology. That's something that was an issue, and a lot of it's going to be about price, because I think they had pricing hubris specifically in China on the 10R version. That hurt them. So I think a lot of questions there in terms of pricing.
All right, thank you so much. Daniel Ives there, Managing Director of Equity Research at Wedbush Securities.